Hi, I'm Rob from B&H, and we're checking out Elektron's new drum machine and sequencer, the Digitakt. There's been a lot of buzz about this bad boy since it was announced at NAMM, since Elektron have made some killer drum machines in the past, like the machine drum and the analog rhythm. Unlike those machines, though, the Digitakt's sound engine is sample-based only, so there's no synthesis engine in here. If you're a beat maker who's been looking to explore the Elektron sequencing world, this streamlined and attractively priced little powerhouse might just be your ticket. The Digitakt offers 8 tracks of internal samples, along with 8 MIDI tracks that can trigger external gear. Now obviously, how it sounds is largely based on the samples that you're using, and you heard what I did with it in that intro. But since the Digitakt offers filtering, effects, envelopes, LFO, etc., let's listen to a couple of the preset patterns and samples so you can get a sense of how it sounds right out of the box. For starters, the chassis on the Digitakt is smaller than previous Elektron boxes, but the knobs and buttons have been made more durable. The backlit trigger buttons are not velocity sensitive and they are a little noisy, but having said that, they actually do feel pretty good. Typical of Elektron, the knobs indent to show parameter values, and turning while indented yields larger value changes. Those of you familiar with Elektron displays will also appreciate the vastly improved OLED screen here, so hooray for that. Underneath the screen are dedicated buttons for patterns, settings, sampling, and tempo, with navigation and yes/no buttons for those menus. A Digitakt project can have up to 128 patterns. They're arranged into banks A through H, each of which holds up to 16 patterns. Calling up a drum pattern also calls up the 8-voice drum kit that goes with it. The top 8 buttons will trigger the sound on each of those tracks and select it for editing, while pressing one of the bottom buttons selects that MIDI track for external instrument sequencing. For drum tracks, 5 pages of sound edits are available. Triggering is where you define note values for the triggers. Source is where you select the sample, tune it, and set start, length, and loop points. Filter lets you add a 2-pole low pass or high pass filter and select the cutoff, resonance, and envelope settings for it. The amp page controls both the panning and the volume envelope, along with the amount of overdrive and the send amounts to the built-in delay and reverb units, both of which sound great in typical Elektron fashion. Each sound has its own LFO, which can be locked to tempo and set to modulate one of numerous parameters from the sample, filter, and amp pages. You can sample directly into the stereo inputs in the back, but since the Digitakt samples in mono, you can either choose the left input, the right input, or both inputs summed together. The Digitakt can also sample itself internally. Maximum sampling time is 33 seconds, no matter how much of the 64 megabytes of project memory is already being used for samples. An additional 1 gigabyte drive is also inside to store projects and patterns, along with raw samples and sounds. The USB also allows you to import samples, which the Digitakt automatically converts to its native mono 16-bit 48 kilohertz format. Like the analog rhythm and the analog 4, the Digitakt will soon support Elektron's Overbridge protocol, which enables audio via USB, on-screen tweaking, and instant recall of Digitakt settings, all on your DAW. The sequencer has all the features we've come to know and love from Elektron. Triggers can be entered in grid mode or played live to create patterns. In grid mode, note values, velocities, and lengths, as well as filter and LFO triggers are set on the trigger page. And you can also set trigger conditions, which are a cool way to add a little variety as a pattern plays back. By holding down the trigger button, you can set a parameter lock or a P-lock on that step, which is one of the things that makes the sequencer so awesome. So for example, you can have a P-lock that opens the cutoff or adds resonance to the filter. Maybe you P-lock some more send to a delay on a certain beat. You can even set a P-lock to trigger a completely different sample. Up to 72 different parameter locks can be programmed per trigger. And yes, you can do a trigless P-lock where only parameters change but no sound is triggered. This can be useful if you want to modify a sound while it's playing. Holding down the trigger and pressing the up and down arrows opens the retrig menu, while the left and right arrow keys will open the micro timing menu. The maximum length for a pattern is 64 steps, and tracks can be set to different time signatures as well as different lengths, which is a cool way to create polyrhythms. You can also record live into the Digitakt sequencer, and a metronome is on board. Since the trigger buttons aren't velocity sensitive though, you'll have to go back and modify the velocities manually, which not everyone is going to like. On the other hand, there is a chromatic mode which turns the triggers into a 1-octave keyboard that can be transposed up and down. And this allows you to play parts in melodically, and your playing can be quantized at both a pattern or track level. Up to 64 pattern entries can be chained together, but there's no song mode yet for the Digitakt OS. The 8 external MIDI tracks are similar, but a little different. Up to 4 notes can be triggered on a step, along with the accompanying velocity and length values. There's even an LFO to modulate MIDI data, and bank and program changes can be sent as well to call up patches. Pitch and mod wheel data can also be sent, as well as aftertouch, breath control, and up to 8 assignable CC commands. A cool feature on the Digitakt, especially for playing live, is the mute mode, which allows you to mute any of the tracks on the fly. You can also nudge the tempo with the arrow buttons to beat match the Digitakt to turntables or media decks, and of course it locks to MIDI clock as well. So there's a relatively brief run-through of the Digitakt sampling drum machine and sequencer. By scaling back some of the features found on earlier drum machines, but keeping their powerful step sequencer intact, Elektron has delivered a terrific sounding hands-on machine at an attractive price point. I'm Rob from B&H, and thanks for watching.